The ban arrived before the company was banned. That sequence is recorded in the letters themselves, and what it means for the supply chain it was designed to interrupt is the entire argument of this reading. On April 28, 2026, the Commerce Department sent emergency as-informed letters to Lam Research, Applied Materials, and the semiconductor equipment company KLA, immediately halting equipment sales to Hua Hong Semiconductor and its manufacturing subsidiary Huawei Microelectronics, entities that had not yet appeared on any formal restricted list. We will read those letters twice, once for what they plainly order, and once for the rationale they conspicuously decline to provide. The document's silence on what Hua Hong was about to become is the point. An as-informed letter is not a designation. It does not add a company to the entity list. It informs a named supplier that the Commerce Department has reason to believe a transaction would violate existing rules, and that belief alone is legally sufficient to stop the sale. The supplier who proceeds after receiving one is presumed to have known. The instrument carries immediate legal force and requires no Federal Register notice, no public comment period, and no formal finding of violation. The letters sent on April 28th created an enforceable ban on a specific date for specific customers, without any of the procedural architecture that a formal designation would require. What the letters plainly establish begins with who received them. Lam Research, Applied Materials, and KLA were named together simultaneously as the suppliers whose transactions were being prohibited. The instrument names these three specifically, not a broad class of vendors, which tells us the Commerce Department already held supply chain data granular enough to act by account. The customers named are Hua Hong Semiconductor and Huawei Microelectronics. Naming both in the same instrument matters. A restriction on the parent that did not name the subsidiary would leave the subsidiary free to place orders on the parent's behalf. The letters foreclose that path. They name Huawei explicitly alongside Hua Hong, and that choice is recorded in the document even though the document never explains the workaround it was designed to prevent. The effective date is the date of receipt. The letters, as reported, included no wind-down period, no grace clause for existing contracts, no transition provision for orders already in transit. Some export control actions include time for suppliers to close pending business. The April 28th letters did not. The absence of a wind-down clause is itself a choice, and a recorded one, because the instrument's silence on transition terms carries the same legal weight as an explicit prohibition. What the letters omit on that question is as operative as what they include. There is a further detail in the instrument's simultaneity. An as-informed letter binds only the recipient. A letter sent to one supplier leaves the others legally free to ship. Commerce sent 3 letters on the same date. That decision is recorded in the document, and it tells us the agency modeled a substitution risk before it acted. If one equipment supplier is told to stop, a customer might redirect orders to another. Sending all 3 letters on April 28th closes that corridor. The simultaneous dispatch records without stating that the concern was not merely the next transaction, but the entire remaining supply relationship. Reading the letters again, the weight shifts to what they do not say. The letters do not state why Hua Hong and why on that date. The as-informed mechanism does not require a stated rationale. The agency asserts a belief. The supplier must act on it. So the document records the restriction without recording the predicate. Whatever intelligence assessment, contract report, or interagency finding triggered the April 28th action is entirely absent from the letters the 3 companies received. The underlying reasoning exists somewhere in the process. It does not exist in this document. The letters do not mention any specific chip production arrangement, any customer Hua Hong might have been supplying, or any production role Hua Hong was reported to be assuming. Reporting at the time described Hua Hong as the likely successor for advanced chip production that Semiconductor Manufacturing International had curtailed under its own export control exposure. The letters record none of that. They are silent on the supply chain they appear to be interrupting. That silence is not an accident of drafting. The as-informed instrument is not designed to carry a narrative, but it means the document that imposed the restriction contains no public record of the restriction's purpose. Consider a landlord who changes the locks on a tenant's supplier before the eviction notice is filed. The locks are real, and immediate. The legal proceeding that would explain them is pending. Anyone trying to read the situation from the lock change alone would know what was stopped, but not why, and the landlord's paperwork would not tell them. The April 28th letters are the lock change. The proceeding is pending. The decisive omission is the one that most separates this instrument from a formal designation. The entity list is public. It binds all technology of United States origin, regardless of which supplier holds the account. It invites a formal response from the named entity. It carries a stated basis. The as-informed letters do none of those things. They restrict 3 named suppliers and leave the formal designation process, with all its procedural requirements, for a later date that the document does not announce. As of the date of the letters, Hua Hong had not been formally designated. The letters imposed a ban without imposing a designation. That gap between restriction and formal status is the operational window the instrument was chosen to close. There is one more absence that the letters do not resolve. The instrument names 3 United States equipment suppliers. It does not address suppliers incorporated elsewhere: the Dutch lithography maker, Japanese process chemistry vendors, Korean metrology providers, whose tools may also be present in Hua Hong's production lines. What the letters stop is bounded by the export jurisdiction reach of the instrument that issued them. What remains in place at Hua Hong's factories is not addressed anywhere in the document. The letters as a record have limits they do not resolve internally. The instrument does not establish whether active procurement orders were pending between Hua Hong and the 3 suppliers at the moment of receipt. The restriction may have interrupted contracts in negotiation, or it may have arrived before any formal orders were placed. The letters do not establish that Hua Hong had accepted or been offered any specific production role from any particular customer. The reporting that described Hua Hong as a likely successor was grounded in industry sourcing, not in a document. Reading the April 28th letters as confirmation of that successor role requires importing a claim the letters themselves do not make. An as-informed letter can also be superseded, withdrawn, or followed by a formal designation that alters its standing. The April 28th letters are a moment in a process the document does not conclude. Read as a record, they establish a restriction and a date, not a motive, a transaction, a production target, or a designation. Read plainly, the April 28th letters are an equipment embargo on a company that had not yet been formally designated, imposed through an instrument that does not require designation, targeting 3 specific suppliers simultaneously, with no stated rationale and no transition terms. The document records the action. It does not record the threat the action was designed to forestall. A formal designation would carry a stated basis. An as-informed letter carries only the agency's belief, and that belief is not transcribed into the instrument. What the letters establish, read carefully against what they omit, is that Commerce moved to write a backup supply arrangement out of the equipment chain before that arrangement had a name in any public record. The restriction preceded the public characterization of the thing being restricted. The most consequential line in the April 28th letters may be the one that was never written, the clause that would have explained why. If and when Hua Hong receives a formal entity list designation, read that document alongside the April 28th letters. Compare whatever stated rationale appears in the formal record against the silence in the emergency instrument. Ask what the designation finally names that the as-informed letter declined to name, and whether the gap between those 2 documents narrows or holds. If you read documents the way this channel does, for what they establish and for what they leave out, subscribe and turn on notifications, and we will keep the record open.